Welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. We will continue the Value Engine series tomorrow, but today we're talking about Voltron, just because I've been noticing this archetype losing its power and just winning less and less games. Now honestly that's anecdotal, but I see a lot of comments saying that same thing, so we're going to address that today because I think a lot of Voltron decks are focusing on just flat out the wrong thing, and by shifting their focus they can not only up their win rate but start winning way more games. So with that being said, let's click on that whatnot link, claim our free $15, get 10% off all of our Tolarian Library proxies, and get right into it. My friends over at Baron of the Dice are having a 15% off site-wide sale until the end of October. So now's the time to go pick up those awesome playmats and deck boxes that match. These are high quality and overall just unique. I'm really just in love with the look and feel of these deck boxes. When it comes to these guys, yes, they sponsor me, but I am a customer first. So I had to let you guys know, go get everything while it's 15% off until the end of the month. Now let's talk about what I think Voltron decks are just focusing way too hard on. And honestly, I think Voltron decks as a whole are playing entirely too much equipment. I understand some decks and some commanders warrant that, but I think a lot of them just don't, and we're putting too much equipment in our deck whenever we're talking about taking up these valuable deck slots. I mean, especially whenever we've got equipment that can flat out buff your commander plus 10, and then from there, he's for sure going to at least two-shot one player. Now, where do we need to shift our focus? Because honestly, the focus for Voltron has always been get my commander to 21 power and start one-shotting my opponents. And I think it does that very, very well. I think it's very easy to get a commander to 21 power and then at least kill one player. But then the other problem is you've got two other players that just saw you kill another player, and now they're going to do everything in their power to just wipe your entire board. And 9 times out of 10, maybe not 9 times out of 10, but often that is what happens. So now you've got one player that's sent back to the Stone Age, one player that's just dead, and the other two are just having kind of a 1v1, and the Voltron player is going to take forever to rebuild, especially if you get rid of all of their equipment. And that's just been a playstyle that everybody has kind of ran into whenever we're talking about Voltron at one point and another, and that leads them to either just flat out getting rid of their Voltron deck, repurposing it, or they're just fine with that playstyle. And I think where we need to shift our focus is into killing at least 2 players in one turn instead of just one, because it's a lot easier to have a 1v1 with one player instead of, 2 players searching for answers to kill your entire board. So that's where I'm going to shift my focus, and it's where I have shifted my focus with a lot of Voltron decks. When we're talking about the Cloud deck, it's kind of Voltron, it's kind of just mass equipment, living weapons, but it is just very consistent and does do disgusting things. And why it does that is because of the core we put in the deck. We put a core in the deck that generates mana whenever we go to combat, and then after we go to combat, we try to draw into as many cards as possible to hopefully draw into another combat step. And then once you get another combat step, at least one more player is dying. And that is what we need to talk about when we're talking about Voltron. How can I generate value whenever I go to combat? How can I get additional combat steps and then ensure that I can kill at least 2 players per turn whenever I do the scary Voltron thing? I think this slow, be a rabid dog, gnaw on one guy's leg until he's dead, then go to the next, is just a strategy that's easily interruptible. And then you have people talking about how Voltron decks are just not that powerful and they get stopped easily. And it kind of goes back to, if you build a deck that is stopped easily by getting rid of the commander, then it is just going to be a deck that gets stopped easily whenever you get rid of the commander. So I think we need to kind of sneak out our wins instead of just being like, I'm going to attack this player until he's dead, then I'm going to go to the next, and then we're going to finish off with this one. Because again, that's a tried and true method, and it's just not working anymore. The power levels of decks is steadily increasing as power creep comes out, and this is a strategy that needs to change what it's trying to do or just die out and be not as viable. And I think changing what it does is pretty easy. So let's get right into it after that long, introduction. A TDLR of this strategy is simple. We want to generate mana through the combat, we want to generate card advantage through the combat step, and then finally we want to include ways to get extra combat steps. Honestly, red is going to be the easiest here, blue has extra turns, and let's be honest, extra turns have been kind of touted as like a salty way to kind of play Magic, especially when 3 players are also, just taking up a ton of time. But whenever you're using them in this context, you're killing one player, extra turn, killing the next player. So this isn't some time sink. This is literally this extra turn is my win con. So the goal of it becomes different. This isn't just, I'm going to cast an extra turn spell here, draw an extra card, and get an extra untap step. This is, I'm going to use this 5 CMC card to kill the next player. And I will say, that's kind of the number we need to be talking about here. We need to try to generate at least 5 mana during the combat step. That way we get enough mana for these extra turn spells and extra combat spells. And while we're talking about that, we also need to be drawing a substantial amount of cards during our combat step. That way we can kind of, dig deep during it. That way we can find more combat steps to kill the next player after that. But enough about the description. Let's talk about some cards. If we're talking about in the context of green, there is no shortage of Rishkar expertise effects. Cards that allow you to draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield. So now you're able to draw 20 cards if your commander has 20 power. Again, green has no shortage of this. It's going to get a little bit harder whenever we go into the other colors. But even blue has this new Starwinder, and I think it even has a robe that does this as well. It allows you to, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw that many cards. So again, there are other ways in other colors to do this exact same thing. You even have things in red like Neheb Dreadhorde Champion. This is one that says whenever he deals combat damage to a player, you can discard any number of cards in your hand, draw that many cards, and then add that much mana to your mana pool. So this guy kind of does the thing of rifling through your deck and generating mana at the same time. And it's simple. If that card in your hand is not an extra combat step, you're pitching it and looking for an extra combat step. You also have the other Neheb that generates mana equal to the damage dealt to opponents. That can be very good with extra combat steps as well, because you're always going to ensure that you're getting that mana to cast your next extra combat step, and that's going to allow you to just flat out kill more players. I know you're saying, okay, you're talking about a lot of extra combat steps. This is kind of primarily talking about red. And if I'm in blue, I can kind of switch off and do extra turn spells. But what about other colors? Well, you're in luck. We have Genji Glove now. And this kind of does exactly what I'm talking about. This is a card that very clearly focuses on taking 2 players out with a Voltron style deck. It's a 5 CMC, 3 to equip, so 8 mana, but 8 mana wins you the game is pretty good. It says equipped creature has double strike, so as long as your commander has 11 power, we're flat out one-shotting people. Whenever this creature attacks, if it's the first combat phase, you get to untap all your creatures, and then there's going to be an additional combat phase, which again allows you to kill 2 players in any color because this is a colorless card. Another card that does this kind of is Sword of War and Peace. This is not only protection, which you need in your Voltron decks, but it says equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from instant and sorceries. Pretty good protection. And then it says whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. Whenever you next cast an instant or sorcery spell, you may copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. Now this is really good for extra turn spells because it just copies the extra turn spell, and for extra combat spells it's also really good. The only caveat I will say with the extra combat spells is you're going to need vigilance, because let's talk about what happens whenever you copy an extra combat spell deck. You're going to untap all your creatures and get an additional combat step. And then the other one's going to resolve and you're going to again untap all your creatures and get an additional combat step. Now that's going to queue up 2 additional combat steps, but only one of them, your creatures are going to be untapped. So you need to ensure that your creature does have vigilance here. But that's not bad because one of the best equipments for Voltron deck does just flat out give your commander vigilance. I'm talking about Excalibur Sword of Eden. This is a 12 CMC legendary artifact equipment, but it gets reduced by the number of historic things you have on the battlefield, so it can be very, very cheap. And then it says equipped creature gets +10/+0 and has vigilance. So boom, get this on the battlefield. Get Genji Gloves on the battlefield, get yourself a Sword of War and Peace, double up those extra combat spells, and you are off to the races. Now, what if you're not in any of these red or blue strategies that can't just go ahead and start doubling up on these extra combat spells and extra turns? Well, you need to shift your focus into doing something different. For green, I love cards like Ram Through and even Windswift Slice. Windswift Slice is a 3 CMC instant that says target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. You get to create a number of 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens equal to the amount of excess damage dealt this way. So if you have one giant creature, you can kind of just create an instant board state by taking out your opponent's creatures. Very useful. There's even equipment that do this. Ram Through kind of does the same thing. It just deals all the excess damage straight to someone's face. So you can kind of kill one player with combat damage, and then you can go ahead and kill the other player with Ram Through damage. White has to deal with this a little bit differently. I think White has a valid life gain strategy that can kind of just offset the life you're losing by just gaining a ton of life with your commander. Additionally, you can always turn to the dark side of stacks, and we can also look at cards like Robe of Stars. It's a 2 CMC equipment that says equipped creature gets +0, +3, and equipped creature can pay 2, and it phases out. What phasing out does is it phases out it and all of the equipment attached to it. Even auras are going to phase out, and that's going to make sure you're protecting all of your equipment and everything. Now, why would we do this? Because right after this, we're going to just flat out board wipe. So you can just kind of play a heavy board wipe strategy whenever we're talking about mono white Voltron decks. And yes, it's going to be kind of terrible to play against, but again, whenever we're talking about utilizing these weaker strategies, I think it's okay to employ some, I don't know, degenerate strategies to make sure we're able to win the game. I would also just like to point out white has amazing equipment tutors. It has your Stoneforge Mystics, your Cloud Midgard Mercenaries, and the first thing you're going to do with these guys is instantly search up Sword of Hearth and Home and start blinking them to find all of your equipment. It's a tried and true strategy and really does kind of catapult you to getting that win off. And the next card you search up is your Genji Gloves, and you're off to the races. You can even equip your Genji Gloves to Cloud Midgard Mercenary and then equip your Excalibur to your commander, and boom, you're going to get 2 additional combat steps, and that can kill all 3 opponents. Kind of cool stuff. I also wanted to point out the Reaver Cleaver and Sword of Hearth and Home. Again, these are just amazing cards to generate mana during the combat step, and then you're untapping all of your lands, or you're just generating mana equal to the creature's power. Notably, pair the Reaver Cleaver with a Voltron commander, and then additionally, you can pair it with your professional Facebreaker effects that allow you to exile treasure tokens to exile the top card of your library, and you can play it, and it kind of turns your massive treasure reservoir into straight up card advantage, and you're able to dig deep for those extra combat steps. Some extra combat steps of note that just will flat out win you the game whenever you're employing this strategy. You have Seize the Day. Seize the Day is a 4 CMC sorcery that says untap target creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase. What's really cool about this is you can flash it back for 3 mana. So whenever you have something like a Sword of Feast and Famine, you can kind of ensure that you're going to get 3 combat steps that turn, and as long as your commander has enough power, you're killing all 3 opponents. Same with Savage Beating. Savage Feeding is just going to give you 1 additional combat step, but it also does give all of your creatures double strike. So this means if your commander has 11 power, you can go ahead and cast Savage Beating, kill 1 player, and then kill the other. And it's kind of like killing a player from your hand. Everybody can do the math on the board, and that's kind of what I'm getting with here. Everybody's doing the math on the board. They're like, okay, I can take a hit from 11. That's kind of what his deck does. I'm going to take at least 1 hit, and then I'm going to have to worry about this. Actually, no, you have to worry about this right here, right now, because now my commander has double strike, and that's using your hidden information to win out of nowhere, and that's what causes them to use the removal. Maybe they had removal for your commander in their hand, but they've done the math. They say they can take 11. They're going to subscribe to taking 11. Then, boom, Savage Beating. Now it's double strike, and now I'm also killing 2 opponents here, and it's kind of in a state where you can just, kill people with hidden information, and that's going to be what makes this strategy a lot more powerful. Full Throttle is a card that gives you 2 additional combat steps, so when we're talking about killing all 3 players, this is going to be one of those cards that can do that. Raphael and Bloodthirster are going to give you additional combat steps whenever they deal damage to each opponent, so they can net you a total of 3 additional combat steps. Now again, this one is kind of on the board knowledge, but again, we can also say that a lot of Voltron decks utilize haste, so it wouldn't be insane to say that we cast these, give them haste, and then it's kind of like using hidden information, but Mirage is just the better choice here. This one gives you an additional combat step whenever a land enters the battlefield, so essentially 1 fetch land, you're getting 2 additional combat steps, and that's going to definitely kill a player, and he can be hidden information, because again, we can go to combat, generate a lot of mana, cast our Mirage, fetch land, win. The only thing with Mirage is he's not going to give you an additional main phase afterwards, so it is just going to have to be, I need the extra combat steps, and then the win is just there. I think that's all I wanted to talk about today. Let me know if you guys like me going in depth into these strategies and just kind of talking about deck creation instead of just giving you guys decks, because I am enjoying it. I had no idea there was an audience that wanted to talk about just how to build decks instead of like, here's a deck. So I'm excited to find you guys. This is amazing.